The swing weight of your golf clubs is largely treated as a one-size-fits-most specification in the golf market we find ourselves in today. If you're lucky enough out there to have a great fitter who addresses something like swing weight during your fit, you're likely in great hands. This video today is all about finding the appropriate swing weight for my current driver setup, talk about how important this specification is to your overall performance out there on the course, and then show you a couple ways that you can address this yourself at home. Let's go. Welcome to Cloudy Coast Golf Co. My name's Johnny, and today we're unpacking the topic of swing weight, specifically in that driver category. Like a lot of the stuff that I'm looking to address on this channel, this is low-hanging fruit for a lot of us out there looking to find more consistency, ultimately with less effort out there on the course. And to get you there, you're just a little bit of knowledge, some removable weights, or a little bit of lead tape away from doing this yourself. This video is going to be more focused on the performance and the feel aspect of swing weight and less so about the technical details, but just so you have a little bit of background about what swing weight is. Essentially, it's just the feel of that club in your hands, and that's going to differ from person to person. This is ultimately quantified in the form of a letter number code, and then often one of the main variables you're getting feedback from when you're out on the tee, giving that club a little waggle for the first time. To affect this feel in the club, there are many factors that have a say. Grip weight, either up or down, head weight, either up or down as well, shaft weight and length, just to name a few. But more importantly than having an understanding of any of those finer details is just knowing what swing weight is ultimately gonna be best for you, that there are some options out there, and then at the end of the day, going with whatever one is ultimately gonna give you your best chance at performing at a high level out there on the course. For this test today, I'm gonna be working my way through 5 different swing weights ranging anywhere from C8 all the way to D6. I'll be using the Ventus VeloCore Plus in the 6X with a Callaway Elite 9-degree triple diamond head in the draw -1 setting. In order to run this test, I did a random order amongst those 5 different swing weights. I'll be starting out at the D2 swing weight, which is right around what I would normally game at. And then I'm gonna be taking 10 shots with each of these weights. And then at the end of this test, evaluate kind of the performance amongst all of the different sets, pick 2 more to do an additional test on, and try to pick between one or the other, discussing the benefits depending on how things look at the end of the day. Let's get started. All right, second set, D6 swing weight. Definitely a lot more weight. You feel it down towards the head. Overall weight-wise, there's definitely more to it as well, but it's really, I'd say if I had to kind of point it out, it kind of feels down in that lower third of the shaft, but certainly getting a lot more of that head weight. D0, we got neutral in the stated lie, And if you have any recommendations for things that can keep the T's in a general area for a home simulator, go ahead and hit me down in the comments. All right, D0, huge weight loss. Honestly, like, feels so much faster, especially coming off the RDX shaft, being counterbalanced, some more weight in the hands. Feel more mid, maybe still kind of down towards the head, but I could say I definitely feel that overall weight. So really more so than either of the other two so far, unless I'm just warming up with how cold it is in this garage right now. Getting more comfortable. 116 on the swing. Club head speed there, that's the fastest by far. It just feels like the shaft's kind of staying with me. I've got an idea where the club is throughout the entire swing. Lightest swing weight in the test. We got the C8 swing weight, and just in the hands, you can definitely tell there's really not much to this. Pretty light in the hands, pretty light overall. First strike there, really the only one out of any of this set where I almost felt the club kind of like twisting out of my hands a bit. I don't know if that's a product of the overall head weight there, but pretty centered strike and still didn't really feel very solid. All right, first 5 in the set there. I gotta say, just out the gate, a couple decent ones squeezed in, but just out the gate, not a huge fan. I do feel like I'm having a difficult time kind of knowing where the club's at a given point. It is working out, but definitely that strike doesn't feel great on any of these so far. Even that last one was a pretty solid shot, but really did not feel like it. All right, D4 swing weight. Still at that neutral standard right now. Last one in the first set here. And just a pretty huge increase from that C8. Pretty balanced. I'd say just more natural and comfortable. Maybe just a tad heavy than I would normally use, but we're gonna see how it performs. 10 shots. All right, so just about to finish up the first set here. Definitely settling in with this one really more than any of the others. Good responsiveness. I feel like I know where the weight's at. It definitely helps me out with the timing. And it's the first one that I can really feel a little bit of bend and feel that shaft load kind of through the transition and into the swing. And I find that I'm kind of leaning into it a little bit more. Still missing a few of them just based on how I'm swinging today. But feeling pretty good overall. The set's, I think, probably gonna shake out as one of the best. More predictable, more consistent, and better overall performance, hopefully at the end of the day with less effort. Those are the goals I have when addressing these different specifications. And although one change might not necessarily attack all of those different variables, the goal is to hopefully knock out as many as possible when making these changes. So with that being said, let's take a look at this first set and see how all those variables were ultimately covered. The first element of these that I want to talk about is effort, and this is really going to be the most significant one that you're gonna feel, at least for me personally, when making specific changes in this weight category that I was able to notice. And here one really stood out at the D4 swing weight, while oddly enough, D0, skipping over the D2 swing weight, felt fairly balanced as well. D6 being the heaviest one in the set, felt like I was managing it quite a bit, while on the opposite end of the spectrum, C8 really had me feeling like I was having to guide the club in order to get it to impact from swing to swing. Looking next at the consistency variable, ideally when finding that right swing weight for you and your swing, that's hopefully going to promote a more repeatable and then ultimately at the end of the day, a better overall quality strike with whatever weight you're going to go with. And that was something I was definitely seeing throughout this set in terms of strike quality. We can definitely see a difference between the 5 different sets. D4, again, finding the middle pretty much every single time, regardless of where those shots were actually ending up. And D0, again, following up in a pretty close second, doing pretty well at managing the consistency of the strike throughout the entire set. While the other 3 swing weights pretty much speak for themselves in terms of overall performance. Where that golf ball was ultimately going, regardless of where I was hitting it on the club face, ended up being pretty unique to each of the individual swing weights when that consistency element really started to show its face. D0 ended up having the best front to back overall dispersion, while D4, though not the greatest from a front to back perspective, had the smallest overall ellipse amongst the 5 different swing weights we tested. And although this first set was conducted at neutral standard, which was not ideal for what I've seen from a performance standpoint with this particular head, and just wanting to keep that consistency at a baseline for this first part of the test, I did see some bias for each of the individual swing weights in terms of left miss or right miss, or maybe a little bit of both out there. C8, though it did eliminate the right miss entirely, was quite erratic to the left. And at the end of the day, I had a pretty tough time knowing where it was going and having an understanding of where the club head was in the swing. D0, on the other hand, managed the middle quite well. However, it did bring both a left and right miss into play. D2 was somewhat at a loss on both aspects, while the 2 heaviest in the test, D4 and D6, largely mitigated that left miss, with the exception of a few bad swings that I had in each of those sets. Now, from a performance characteristic standpoint, if we're looking at the big picture in terms of how all these variables are coming together in order to pick the best of these different swing weights that were being tested, there are 2 that are really starting to stand out. But if we look at the numbers in a little bit more detail, there really are not too many differences in terms of just how the different swing weights ultimately performed. D6 came in at the slowest club head speed, while C8 was the fastest, which fits what you would expect out of testing these different types of swing weights. However, both came in at the slowest average ball speed throughout that first set. Likely that was related to the lack of consistency that I was seeing in each of those individual swing weights in terms of repeatability of the strike and just being all over the club face. Additionally, all of the equipment was acclimated to the garage, which was sitting at a 50-some degree temperature. So that was definitely having an effect on the smash factor or that efficiency that I was getting out of each of the strikes throughout the entire test. But with that being said, and needing to only pick 2 of the swing weights from the first part of this test in order to continue on into part 2, the evidence for me was pretty clear after conducting the first part of the test. And really that was just the feel I had when I was taking an opportunity to go through the set of 10 shots at each of those. And that was the D0 swing weight and then the D4 swing weight. So with that being said, we're gonna dig into part 2 of this test, trying to dial in the club head for each of those different settings and seeing at the end of the day, which one is ultimately gonna perform the best for my game. All right, second set for the D4 swing weight. Ended up making a couple adjustments with the hosel setting here. Ended up just at neutral -1, which helped bring the ball down a little bit. I do like how it looks at address in terms of framing the ball a little bit more than that neutral standard setting. So we're gonna see how it performs. Just gonna hit some shots, try to accumulate probably 4 to 5 quality strikes to be able to compare these side by side. All right, final set here. You got the D0 swing weight, currently in a -1 of the draw setting on there. If you remember that from the Fujikura profile testing, that was the absolute weapon in the red profile. Based on the initial set I just did as I was making these adjustments, it was working pretty darn good. So hopefully I can keep it going on here while it's recording, and we'll see ultimately how it compares to those numbers off of the D4 swing weight. One quick thing before getting into the last part of this video. If you find yourself amongst the 97+% who are not subscribed and you're watching it this far in, chances are you like it enough to click that subscribe button down below. I would very much appreciate your support, and my promise to you is that I will continue to try to grow and improve the type of content that I am producing on this channel in an effort to better serve those of you who are following me along and trying to improve all of our golf games, try to make things a little bit more accessible for each of us at home, just looking to play better golf at the end of the day. So with that being said, let's get into the debrief here. And funny enough, when I had the opportunity to look through these numbers after taking quite some time and going through each of the videos in the final 2 sets, it's been very difficult for me to actually pick a winner. Fatigue was definitely starting to play a factor towards the end of this test, with club head speeds for each of these swing weights dropping off a decent bit in comparison to the first set. And at the end of the day, both of these swing weights did perform quite well, and I could see myself using either of them in the bag at any given point in time. The D4 swing weight virtually eliminated the left side of the golf course, while D0 did the exact same for the right side of the course, with the exception of each set having 1 errant shot apiece. And though I wasn't hitting it perfect throughout either of these last 2 sets, any mishits that I did have outside of those 2 errant shots were doing a good job at finding the middle of the course. Both swing weights, though slower, were still both very comfortable. And the D0 being at that slightly lighter weight really did allow me to go at it a little bit harder just with that fatigue having played in, which is something I'm taking into consideration if I was out there on the course, and that repeatability and consistency and not having to necessarily manage that higher amount of weight on that driver. Consistency, though, from a strike location standpoint, did go slightly in favor with D4 again. And like we saw in the first set, I was able to repeat that swing pretty consistently. And though it wasn't quite as good in the second set as it was in the first set, it still managed the middle quite well. And I did find myself being really comfortable with that swing, and whether that was how it fit the tempo. But at the end of the day, it was something that felt easy for me to repeat, and then ultimately have an understanding as to where that club head was at any given point in time in the swing, and including the bad ones as well, which is a super important thing to have that feel and knowing where the club is ultimately going to be. But after taking out a few of the mishits from each of these groups, both of these sets were quite accurate for me, and the D0 swing weight at the end of the day barely beat out the D4 in terms of average ball speed and overall carry distance. But at the end of the day, which one wins and is going to find its way in the bag, and then continuing the testing that I'm doing throughout the rest of this offseason here. And that's going to be the D4 swing weight, strictly for the reason of the consistency in the strike that I was able to see throughout the duration of the test today. And additionally, from the fact that it virtually eliminated the left side of the golf course, and is really going to give me an opportunity to be a little bit more aggressive with how I'm swinging this club or how I'm attacking certain tee shots going forward into this next year. With that being said, the D0 swing weight did perform quite well, and it is something that I am going to keep in my back pocket to maybe mess around with a little bit. And maybe that's not going to be necessarily with this driver specifically, but potentially different clubs in the bag or different setups that I'm looking to maybe mess around with later on in the season. But for those of you at home who are interested in doing a test like this yourself, and though you might not have a swing weight scale or a variety of removable weights to ultimately work with at home, stay tuned to the end. There's a little bit of a bonus video for you just to show how access to a roll of lead tape and a tape measure is all you need to ultimately be able to mess around with some of these different swing weights yourself in an effort to try to see maybe which removable weights you're ultimately going to need to buy to save some money going forward with your own particular testing. But with that being said, if you've made it this far, thank you as always for tuning in. Questions, comments, or things that have worked for you, let me hear it down below in the comments. Additionally, if there's anything that you would like to see on the channel, please let me know down below, and I'll try to include that in future videos that I'm working on. And as always, I'll see you next time. All right, so I just finalized the 5 different swing weights that I'm going to be doing in this test today. And I did want to touch on one option at home for you. If you did not have a scale, you didn't have the removable weights that go with the individual club heads themselves, and that would just be going out and buying a roll of lead tape that's available either on Amazon or a variety of different golf specific websites that exist out there. This is a 1-inch roll of lead tape. So for every 2 inches, you're going to get about 2 grams of total weight that you can add to it. And I'm just going to show you here just how 1 2-gram piece can just affect that swing weight up and down. And that would allow you, if you were going out on the driving range or something like that, and you wanted to do some incremental adds, you could just at home measure these out, cut them, and know roughly you're increasing the swing weight by about 1 point for each piece of tape that you'd be putting on the club. And then maybe that helps you save a little bit of money and just buy the specific removable weights that you can add at a later point in time. So I'm gonna show you that here. All right, so just looking at this current setup right now, I've got the driver set up for the first set. It's gonna be at a D2 swing weight, and you can see we're right at D2 there. I've got a 14-gram weight in the front, and then the black 4-gram weight in the back of the Elite Triple Diamond here. And like I was talking about, say you didn't have the removable weights, you were just going with what was stock in there, you've got your option for just a piece of lead tape. One thing in general to take into account when you are using a product like lead tape for swing weighting, either irons, woods, or whatever it might be, is just be careful with it. It is not good for you if you're handling it a lot, and you just want to make sure that you're washing your hands. So just a little PSA there, but you can see we've got a 2-inch piece of tape here, and if we slap it on the scale, it's right at 2.1. Now if we take the backing off of it here, slap it on the scale, exactly at 2 grams there on the scale. So We just come in, and this is just for demonstration purposes. I guess if you were doing this yourself, you can really change the CG of the head by moving this in a variety of different locations. Like we've seen a lot of perimeter weighting on different models of clubs out there, but just to attach it for the head for this, this purpose, I'm just gonna slap it right on the middle there. We'll pop it in the swing weight scale. And you can see we're immediately out of balance there. So I'm gonna knock this up. So that swing weight is gonna increase because we added it to the head. Conversely, if you were gonna add weight to the grip, it would make the swing weight lighter. And you can see with that 2 grams added to the head, we're looking right about a 1.2 to 1.3 increase in the overall swing weight.